Hey, it's the Open Country Credits. I'm here with JV Zielke, a videographer and a poet and an author, a cowboy. So how are you doing? I'm super excited to chat with you about a bunch of different things.
I'm good. I've been a busy couple weeks. Just got back from the NFR in Las Vegas, so there's lots happening down there, and then just drove all the way back to Wyoming. So here we are.
Yeah, so obviously I know a lot about you, but I think a lot of people watching this might not know exactly who you are, or they'll know who you are, but they won't know about your history and stuff. So if you could kind of like, I was thinking we could run it back and you can talk about where you're from and how you got into like agriculture and the cowboy lifestyle, and then we'll jump into how you got into videography and all different stuff. So if you can kind of like start from the beginning and give a background on yourself, I think that would be cool.
Yeah. I kind of bounced. I kind of bounced around growing up a little bit, but I would say the majority of my childhood was spent in northern Colorado. That's where I kind of got into ranching, agriculture, horses, all that stuff was in northern Colorado. Um, I didn't come from a family that had anything to do with agriculture, so I'm first generation in that regard. And I, when I was about 7 years old, my mom worked at the only grocery store in town, so she knew every person in town. And there was a lady that always came in and she said, "You really ought to have your sons come out and get on some of my horses if they've never tried it." And so at 7 years old, I went out there to this lady's house and jumped on a horse, and it was kind of game over after that. I was addicted, and I spent the rest of my like teen years um, working for free for people as long as they would, trade me some knowledge as far as what I should be doing and what I could be better at and things like that. So um, that was how I got into ranching and horses and all that stuff. I'd work around, and that eventually turned into Estes Park, which is I lived there for a while. Estes Park has one of the most famous rodeos in the country, and it's called the Rooftop Rodeo, and it wins big awards all the time and stuff. It's one of the best. It's a lot of cowboys' favorite rodeos or favorite rodeo, and so as a kid, I'd go there and volunteer for free, and I just wanted to hang around the cowboys there and learn from them. And so I got into riding sheep and then calves and steers and worked my way up to bulls. And I was, I guess I was probably 12 or 13 the first time I got on a bull, like a full grown
Wow.
rodeo bull. And it's kind of a funny story. I got on that bull and I got just walloped and knocked the wind out of me. And I thought, why would anybody ever want to do that? And I went back behind the chutes, and I was getting ready to pack up all my stuff and go home with my tail tucked. And it was a school, it was a bull riding school I was at, and the coach said, "Okay, who wants to get on another one?" And every kid raised their hand, and I thought, well, I ain't gonna be a pussy. I'll get on another one. So I got on the second one, and I rode that one, and then I felt what it felt like to win or succeed in bull riding, and I was just hooked to it. So
Wow.
um, I rode bulls for almost over a decade. Ended up going to college on a scholarship to ride bulls at the University of Wyoming, and that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at now.
So is it like, do you find that a lot of the people out there actually do that, or is it more so like a small group of people that actually got as involved in it as you?
uh, Rodeo in this part of the country, like Wyoming specifically, rodeo is just as common as kids playing, high school football or high school basketball. I mean, more or less everybody does it. Not everybody rides bulls. There's a lot of different events that happen in rodeo. So, they pick and choose which ones they want to do, but it's very common out here. That's not necessarily true everywhere else in the country.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So okay, so then you went to college, you graduated, and then was it after that that you did most of your traveling around to different continents, or was that? Like
Hmm.
going on breaks or
So the timeline with that was I forget what year it was, but I got in a really bad bull riding wreck in Casper. And I didn't retire after that bull riding wreck, but it was never the same, and I just wasn't quite as invested in it. So I ended up retiring and hanging up my bull rope, and I was only, I don't know, 21 or 22 years old. And I that left a huge void in my life, not having rodeo and bull riding. And I was kind of trying to figure out who I was as a person when I was no longer a rodeo cowboy. And I saw a video on YouTube one day of these guys catching wild bulls in Australia. And I thought that looked like a lot of fun. Looked dangerous, but it looked fun. And it just so happened that there was a gal in one of my classes at the University of Wyoming from Australia. Her name was Lizzie. And she was a foreign exchange student. And I showed her that video and I said, "Do you think you could get me a job doing this?" And she said, "All of you Americans ask that, and then if I set it up, you never go. So no, I'm not going to stick my neck out for you." And so I pestered her a bunch, and finally I got her to hook me up. And it turns out her brother did that for a living. So I went and worked for her brother in Australia for 4 months, caught wild bulls, and it was very
wow,
wild. I
that's
didn't sleep I didn't sleep inside for uh I guess it was like 3 or 4 months. I didn't sleep inside. I just slept in a bedroll.
so were you like
Um
scared at all to go venture off and do that like the first time?
yeah, I mean at that point in my life I don't know if I'd ever even seen the ocean. I hadn't done much traveling ever. I just, kind of lived in the center of the country.
Mhm.
And so that was my first time leaving the country, first time trying any of that stuff. And not only was I doing that, I was all alone and I was going to somewhere very, very remote. I ended up having to take the mail plane. It was like a little small airplane that would drop off the mail and the produce and people. And it did like a school bus route every couple times a week. And so they just dumped me off in on a dirt airstrip in the middle of nowhere. And
Oh my gosh, that's
it
wild.
was so it wasn't like a slow gradual easing into international travel. I was dumped straight on my head in the middle of nowhere. So it certainly was scary doing that for the first time, but that's kind of what I enjoyed about it. I mean, I was trying to replace climbing on rodeo bulls in my life, and that filled that void.
So okay, so then after Australia you came back or you went straight elsewhere?
After Australia, I came back because I hadn't quite finished at university.
Okay.
So I was double majoring, so it took me an extra semester. So I came back, finished my last semester of college,
Mhm.
and when I finished, uh, I got my undergrad in veterinary science, which is essentially like pre-vet. And then I also got a degree in ag business. And when I finished, I was talking to somebody who had their master's degree in a similar field, and they were telling me they couldn't get hired anywhere because they didn't speak a second language, and they were getting, even with a master's degree, they were being passed over for people with high school educations, but they were bilingual.
Oh my gosh.
Then I got to thinking, well, I've never taken a Spanish class in my life. I should probably learn. So I started, I mean, really the only useful skill set I had uh was the kind of cowboy skill set. I knew how to work cows, I knew how to work horses, and I had a strong back and I was willing to work. So I started looking around for ranch jobs in countries that spoke Spanish, and I ended up finding one down in Argentina. So I moved down to Argentina speaking zero Spanish, um, and I was there for 3 months living with gauchos, a lot of the time in the middle of nowhere, and that's a very quick way to learn Spanish.
It's crazy. So did you at this point, like at this point, were you doing any video work or was it just okay? It was just all
No, I never picked up a real camera until much later in my travels because I was I didn't really have the foresight to see that what I was doing was something that, was worth documenting. So I just had a real crappy old iPhone that was like 16 gigs. And so every time you would take a picture, it would say iPhone full. So from the entire time in Australia, I might have like 6 or 7 pictures I took on my iPhone. And that theme continued through Argentina and then on to um, when I got back from Argentina. That was when somebody was like, "Man, you're seeing things that other people may never see again, and you should probably document it." So I
Yeah.
went and bought the cheapest DSLR camera that Nikon makes, and I took that. My next stop after Argentina was Sweden,
Oh,
and I took that to Sweden, and that was the first place I ever had a camera with me. Video didn't start happening until it's only been like 2 or 3 years that I've been doing video. I did photography for quite a while before that.
okay. So you're doing, so while you're there, like what was some of the typical work that they had you doing? Was it like very different than the work that you had been doing out west or?
Not necessarily. Like with ranching worldwide, no matter where you are, it's always the same end goal. You're trying to raise healthy, nutritious food for your family, regardless of where in the world you are. That is the entire purpose of ranching. So everywhere you went, the end goal was raising healthy animals, uh, to an age where they were ready to be butchered. So the work itself was mostly the same, but the ways that they did it was certainly different. So it was, some places where labor was very cheap. So work was done mostly just by a bunch of, laborers. And then other places I went, labor is very expensive, and so they invested in machinery more, and they would have high-tech tractors and machines that could do almost every job. So the way they got to that finished product was different, but it was always the same goal.
Wow. So what was like what was your favorite place that out of all the ones?
um probably my favorite place I ever went to was Mongolia. It's a very cool place. If I was going to actually live somewhere outside the US, it would probably be Argentina. I love Argentina and the language and the people. But Mongolia, as far as an adventure and learning new things and seeing really cool things, Mongolia probably takes the cake on that.
So did you learn it quickly? Like, did you learn Spanish quickly or was it hard?
Yeah, I mean, when you have no other option but to speak Spanish, you start picking it up pretty quickly. I also used an app on my phone, called Duolingo, and I would use that for 15 minutes a day and learn as many words as I could. And then I would go out and try and use those words in daily conversation. But the people I worked with in Argentina, the majority of them couldn't even read or write. I mean, these are gauchos. They've lived their entire life horseback, and most of them never had the opportunity to go to school. So their Spanish certainly was not correct. And
Mm.
so even now to this day, like I've worked with a lot of Mexicans, Peruvians, Argentinians, Spaniards, and my Spanish, because of the way I learned it, I didn't learn in a classroom. Um, I very much have like that kind of farm worker type of Spanish where
It's
I could
like,
not tell you. Yeah, it's a lot of slang. I couldn't tell you the Spanish words for, probably normal city life in Spanish, maybe some of them, but out on a ranch, it's a lot different.
so what's like, if you had to choose, what would be your biggest lesson that you learned while traveling?
Um,
Must have been so many moments when you were taken back or like threw into a situation that took some like getting adjusted to. So I'm sure you learned like a million lessons.
yeah, I learned a lot. I always wish that I could like have dinner with myself before I ever left the United States, just
Wait,
to see just to see like who I was, because I know it was a very different person. Like it's hard to even when you go through that drastic of changes in your life and that many dangerous situations and like I mean, it obviously changes you as a person. So,
Next question was literally, so my next question was going to be, if you could describe yourself in 3 words prior to traveling versus after traveling, what would they have been? Like 3 words before, 3 words after. Because it probably,
um,
I mean, literally, it probably changed your life more than you could describe.
yeah, I think before 3 words would probably be probably the first word would be wild, just very wild. Um, I, I'm trying to think of the right word for this, but like just kind of ignorant,
Mhm.
really ignorant to the ways of the world. Um, oh, and another good word, cocksure. That'd be the third word. Do you know
Okay.
what do you know what that means?
Go.
Uh, I learned this word a couple years ago. I think it's a great word, but cocksure just means like it's kind of like cocky, but it's like the way that you would describe a rooster strutting around in a farmyard. Like they're like you just they have they don't care about the danger. They're just strutting around like
Kind of
trying
like
to be.
naive and cocky at the same time, potentially, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, kind of. But I think that yeah, that would describe me before I went and started traveling a bunch.
Okay, now after.
Um,
You're like, oh,
After probably feral would be the first word after. Um,
okay.
Humbled would probably be another one, and aware, just
Well, hmm,
aware of what's going on in the world, but also very aware of what's going on around me.
hmm,
Um, I was in a lot of very dangerous, like life-threatening kind of situations traveling, and so uh, it makes me much more just aware of danger, being robbed, being jumped, being hurt, and also just aware of people's personalities. Like I think I read people at a much deeper level now. I'm much more content sitting back and watching than being in the middle of the conversation.
that's crazy. That's really interesting. Um, do you like stay in touch with anyone that you met, or was it more so just work and then heading out?
Somewhat. I do. A lot of the places that I went, that people don't have phones. So,
That's kind of what I was,
um, what's that?
that's kind of what I was thinking. That's why I didn't know if it was like you work and then you kind of just head on your way, or if it was anything that like there was a way to for you to stay in touch with some of them.
Yeah, some of the people I stay in touch with, it's just a little bit harder internationally. Like I still talk to some friends in South Africa. Um, I still talk to some friends from Australia. I still see things and talk to the folks in Sweden also, um, online and stuff. And I really Mongolia is the one that I don't really talk to any, like they just I never learned their language and most people there don't speak English. So that
That's a
was
good place. That's where you would want to live.
no, I would live in Argentina,
Oh, okay.
but
But you like enjoyed it or something, you said?
I just really liked Mongolia. I would go back there in a heartbeat. It's just we kind of had like I had like a translator of sorts around for part of that trip. There was always somebody there that kind of could somewhat decipher what was being said, but I picked up um very few words in that language because that's an extremely tough language to learn or speak.
Mm. So at this time, or like at what time did you like come up with the whole lost cowboy thing? On that, like, was that something that you came up with for yourself, or did someone else say it and then you kind of just ran with it, or how did that come into play?
No, I wish I had like some great story for that, but I know exactly where I was when I came up with it. I was working for my grandpa on the ranch, or I call him my grandpa, and I was out on a four-wheeler. It was probably like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and I was checking cows. It was freezing cold, and I was out there by myself. but I was trying to think about what to call. When I was in South Africa, somebody told me down there, he was like, man, you should really make an Instagram. It's more based around photography. And I've seen on your Facebook page, you'll share photos and they're really good. You should try and do that on Instagram because people might like it. So I didn't make one while I was down there, but when I got back to the States, I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna make an Instagram and see how this is done. And so I was trying to think of what would be a cool Instagram handle.
That's it?
So yeah, that was it. I was just riding around on a four-wheeler through a bunch of cows in the middle, super early in the morning. And I thought, well, that's a pretty good explanation of me. I'm just
Cool.
lost cowboying around the world.
That's so cool. So, all right. So you started the Instagram page, it's photos. How does it transition into you becoming an author? Like, was that
Uh,
something you thought you would do in your life, or was that something that just kind of,
no, no,
because I know you said, I think you said like you just kind of watched YouTube videos and figured out how to publish a book on your own.
more or less, yeah. When I thought to write the book, when I was living in Mexico, I lived in a very rough part of Mexico, and there was a lot of scary and illegal things happening all around me, and I just kept my head down and kept working. I had a great time. I love Mexico, but that was a very real thing down there. And I there was one night where I kind of accidentally ended up in the middle of a gunfight between two rival cartels, and they weren't out to get me, but they were nevertheless having a big gunfight in the streets right outside the house. And I was living with this very old woman that spoke no English, and she was telling me to lay on the floor below the window level because the house was all stucco, so it would probably stop a bullet. But if you were standing in the window, you could catch a stray bullet.
That's insane.
So
It's crazy.
yeah, so I was laying there on that cold concrete floor, just looking at the ceiling, listening to thousands of rounds be fired outside, right outside the house. And I was thinking, there's a very good chance that, if this doesn't kill me, something that I'm doing probably will. And I would hate to take all these stories to the grave with me. So it was that next day I started writing things down, and then I got back to the ranch, and I was night cabbing. And night cabbing, for people that don't know what it is, it's um in the northern parts of the country where it's really cold. During calving season, you're always out there watching the cows, seeing if any of the babies need help or they need help giving birth. Um, and it's a hard job, and somebody has to take the night shift. And so I always enjoyed the night shift. I would wake up at like 6 p.m., go to the gym, be back by 7:30, and I would start checking cows. And you check them every hour on the hour. So you leave the barn and you go out and you ride through all these cows looking, just making sure nobody needs help. And a lot of times they do. Um, and it was at that time I would have an hour free at a time. And so I was just sitting there in a barn by a space heater, and that was when I started writing. Was I just would bring my laptop with me, and I would write 1,000 words per night, um,
It's
which
incredible.
was essentially one story. Almost all the stories in my book ended up being roughly 1,000 words, so they're all kind of short chapters. And that was how I wrote the whole book, ranching at night.
That's incredible. Wow. So, all right. So you're writing stories, like, do you, I feel like you're a very good talker and you're like, have a good vocabulary, but like, are you, like, did that feel natural for you to just like write it all down, or was it like a struggle at times to like think of putting everything together and actually publish a book? Like, did you,
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess I'm saying?
Say that last part again.
Was there times where you felt like you had writer's block, or was it all just like flowing and you're like, oh, I'm into this? Like,
No, it was not that hard for me, especially at 1,000 words a day. 1,000 words is It
Not
might
that
seem like a lot at first, but if you get used to doing that every day, that's not that much to write that. Also, I mean, one, I wasn't necessarily intending for this to be a book. I just wanted these because I didn't think I was capable of writing a book or a good enough writer to do that. So really what I was doing, it was almost like a diary that knowing that, I honestly, I like really thought I was going to die. So this was me writing them down so that somebody else would find them and, publish them after I'm dead. And so that was kind of the plan the whole way through. I never intended to publish it myself. It was mostly just some records so that
mm,
somebody else may find them one day, hopefully. And I told people like if I die doing any of these crazy adventures I go on, make sure you get this laptop because it's got all the stories on it.
wait,
And
so
so
your fear of like potentially dying ever make you want to stop doing what you were doing, or you were just down to keep doing it?
no, I don't think it certainly wasn't a fear of dying. It was just an acknowledgement that it's real.
Okay, but that never made you feel like I just kind of want to like go home, or
No, no, never. I mean, that like drove me to do it more. I think that's the whole point of living is to push the envelope and experience things outside of your comfort zone. So that's what I enjoyed the most about all of it. It's what made me feel most alive. But I'm just also well aware, of the consequences of that. This is something that, uh, you know, people there's a great book by a big wave surfer called Laird Hamilton and the book's called Life Rider and he talks about death in that book and how different societies view it differently and in most first world countries, wealthy societies, death is hidden from you and like most people may never see a dead body in their life or if they do it's like at a funeral in a coffin or something like that but for the most part, it's hidden from our eyes because how do you convince somebody to work a 40-year career 9 to 5 and convince them that that 401k is worth giving up the best years of your life to sit and work for somebody else? The only way you can convince them to do that is by making them think that they're promised to live to be 60 or 65. And that's ridiculous, but that's certainly like a what's been pushed on a lot of societies. So you go to like India or a lot of these Pacific Islander cultures and stuff, and they have these like great big public funerals, and you see death all the time. You go to Africa, life is very cheap. You see people die all the time, and in seeing that, it makes it more real. Like it just seems it's kind of mind blowing to me that people, especially here at home in America, is just like think they can't die. That doesn't mean they live a risky life. It just means that they are making to live like a miserable life and be planning for 40 years from now. That I can't wrap my brain around that.
do you feel like do you feel like they're happier in the other countries that like like in some of those situations, like the people that like the countries that you were just describing, the areas, whatever, like you feel like the people there live more for the moment and like are happier?
Absolutely. Those people live in the present and sometimes almost to their own demise because, like in Africa, a lot of the guys I worked with they'd get paid at the end of the month and they would go into town and spend almost their entire paycheck, which was very little. It was like $300 or $400. But they would go get super drunk and party for
Spend
one night and be out of money for the next month. So you don't want like too much of that YOLO life kind of life motto type thing. But I do think that people that live in the present are generally more happy. And those people in Africa, Mongolia, Argentina, places like that, they they generally understood that tomorrow's not promised. And because of that, I think they lived a higher quality life
yeah,
than
sure.
than a lot of other places.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, no, I agree. They probably did. But so okay, so you're writing the stories and then at what point was it like I'm gonna actually make it a book? Like did someone approach you and say like you should publish it or were you just like I'm gonna do this? Like,
What happened was I had probably three-quarters of the book written, and there was during COVID, I went out to California. I had some friends that bought a farm out there, and they had never owned a farm before, and so we had met. They were kind of hanging out with some friends in Wyoming, just very randomly. Met them, and they're from California, and they didn't really come from an ag background or anything, but it was a dream of theirs to own a farm someday. And I kind of halfway jokingly said to them, if you ever get one, give me a call. I'll be happy to help you run it or at least get it set up for you. And I didn't think they ever would. And then,
like,
like a few weeks before COVID hit, they closed on this property out on Highway 1, right on the ocean in California. And they called me and they said we could use your help. This place is really run down. The fences are down. The corrals are all falling. Everything's fallen apart. It's been neglected for a long time, so we could use your help rebuilding it. So I moved out there and spent several months rebuilding that whole farm for them. And uh, they had a nanny that was working for them also, and she was a Stanford student. And so we would all come together every night and have dinner together. And I had mentioned to this girl working for them that I had written all this stuff, but I didn't know what to do with it. And she said, "Well, would you send it to me? I'd love to read it." And I said, "Sure." So I sent it over to her and just in like a Word document form. And she read the whole thing and thought it was so amazing that for Christmas that year, she printed off each individual page and folded them in half and hand sewed a binding and made it into a book. And then she drew the cover by hand. And she was like, what's that?
like your gift, or she was gifting it to someone?
No, she gifted it to me
Oh my
because
gosh, that's so cool.
she was essentially she was just trying to show me. She was like, this should be a book. Look
Mhm,
at this. It
mhm.
can be a book. You just need to finish it. So um I did after she did that, I finished the book.
Yeah,
And
so
she ended up being my editor on it too, because she's
fun.
not she's not like a professional editor in any way, but she like as we speak, she's getting her PhD in biomedical engineering at Princeton. So she's way smarter than me. And so I would just send her this stuff and I used software too. I used like Grammarly and Hemingway just to kind of clean it all up. And then I sent it off to her and she did the final reads through it. But there was nothing professional about the entire book. Like there's no publisher involved. There's no nothing. It's entirely just I paid a lady, she is a professional, I shouldn't say nothing, but she formatted the book and she put, helped make everything fit. And then she put it on Amazon so that it could be purchased by people. So that's what she does for a living. So that was professional. Other than that, this entire book was just like,
That's so crazy.
pretty rough.
That's so crazy that like, okay, so if you go back to like the guy that was like you should start Instagram, and then the Lost Cowboy, and then meeting her, and then that's crazy. Like how one thing trickled down and affected the next thing. She kind of
Yeah,
shaped.
and I'm so grateful that she like pushed me to do that. And then I don't really think, the book is rough and I know that. And I think there's still grammatical errors in the book.
That's
There,
okay.
there's a couple that people have sent me and I just have never fixed them. So if you go on Amazon, I couldn't tell you where or what they are, but if you go on Amazon now and if you're like a real grammar nerd or whatever, I'm sure you can find mistakes in the book. But the book uh it won two Spur Awards to the Western Writers of America, which is
That's so
that's
crazy.
that's about as big as it gets in like the Western genre of writing. And
Mm.
so to me, I was just mind blown
Do you feel
that
like you're like what like what's going on like 24/7? I feel like you're probably just like what is happening? Because I just feel like you
I,
didn't plan for any of this, but it's kind of just happening.
yeah, I mean I do a little bit, but I also try not to look a gift horse in the mouth. Like when things happen, I just try to be as grateful for them as I can be, and I don't necessarily try to question why or how. And I just my entire life I've just pursued stuff that I really liked doing. I never chased money. I never like wanted to do things to impress people. I just always chase what I like to do, and in doing that, it seems like it's worked out pretty good so far.
I'd say so. Um, so all right, so kind of bouncing into like the whole art and music thing now. Um, would you like describe yourself as like an artsy person? Like always, or was that obviously you got into videography later in life, but like I feel like you have a whole side of like the agriculture and the cowboy stuff, and then you have like a very artistic side. Like, do you
Hmm.
like have like would you describe yourself always like that, like an artistic person, or it kind of came later once you got into photo and video a lot?
Um, yeah, I mean, even as a kid, I would write poems and stuff. But not terribly artistic, especially when it comes to visual stuff. I certainly wasn't like a standout student in art class or anything like that. But um, there's always been a creative part of my brain that I could tap into, and this is actually really interesting. I have a friend who had a very serious traumatic brain injury, and I'm not going to say his name, but he's a musician, and he never had any really musical skill until this traumatic brain injury happened. And they thought he was going to die. They thought he might be a vegetable. And when he came out of it, um, he picked up like within 3 weeks, he could play guitar better than most people. And we talked about this a lot, that he thinks that it kind of rewired his brain to tap into that creative side more.
Mm.
And I think there's some truth to that because I've had a lot of concussions, and that bad bull riding wreck that
Oh, wow.
eventually ended my career was a very serious like TBI brain injury. Um,
Oh, wow.
but I probably had 12, 13 somewhat serious concussions. And so I wonder about that a lot. If my brain hasn't like been pounded into being artistic.
Sure. That's I would have never thought of that, but I mean, maybe that's crazy. So, okay, so you're into video. Well, no, you were into photo first. So then video, you when did you get a camera and like who was the first artist that you videoed and like did you video someone first and then start the Dusty Vaquero page or did you like tell us about that?
So um the switch from photo to video happened when uh I went to Alaska and I worked on a ranch in Alaska for a little bit.
That's cool.
And while I was up there, I met this girl who was an influencer, I guess. But she had gone to film school and knew a lot about video. And so she was telling me, she's like, your photos are good, and I'm not telling you your business, but video is coming big time. And photography is going to go away, not go away, but it's not going to have the same place that it did because video content is the new thing. And she said, so, do what you want, but you should probably seriously look into figuring out some video. So I went and bought a camera that could shoot both photos and video. And that was when I started dabbling in video a little bit more. The first thing I ever shot video of was just a live show. And that was just, it was kind of luck because they had a person already lined up to shoot it and they couldn't make it for some reason. And so I got the call like the day of, and they're like, it was a friend of mine, and they're like, hey, I know you've got that camera. I don't know if you even know how to use it yet, but would you be willing to come shoot some video of this show? And I was like, sure, I'll come do it. So that was the first thing I ever shot video wise that was music related. It wasn't too long after that I created Dusty Vaquero because I saw this void where I saw these like Western rancher cowboy artists that were not getting, because there's some great YouTube channels out there that discover artists, right? Like they're really like Gems and Western AF, and there's a bunch of them now, but those are some of my favorite things to watch. But I was noticing on these channels, I was like, where where are my friends, where are the people that look like me and do what I do? And there was very few. So once I thought, well, I could either sit here and complain about it or I could go do something about it and start shooting some of these just see what happens. And so the very first two people that I shot with, we did uh their videos the same day at the same place was Kellen Smith, who you recently featured, and then Sterling Drake. Those two were the first two that I ever
I
shot
didn't know
videos with.
Maryland too. That's cool.
Yeah, and then after I did those videos with them, people kind of noticed a little bit, and it immediately took off and snowballed. And so in the next 2 months, I think I shot videos with like 35 artists. Like it really took off quickly.
You had the Instagram page already and like YouTube
Well,
channel or no? Okay.
I I think the very first Instagram post I ever made was Kellen, probably.
Okay.
So yeah, that shoot was the first like intentional acoustic session video that I ever did. And then it took off mostly in the state of Wyoming or kind of locally. It took off because this scene we've talked about this before, but this scene that's happening in Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, um, is somewhat unnoticed by a lot of people in the industry. And so there was a lot of people, great musicians around here that were not quite getting the attention that they probably should have.
Yeah. Do you find that that was like how much of that do you find was because of the location and like being far away from a I guess a bigger city with like recording studios and publishing groups and stuff like that versus just a shift in like what's popular in the moment. Like now Western stuff is very popular, so a lot of eyes are on it. And do you think like for a while it was just people weren't interested, or like if they were closer to a city like Nashville or whatever, that it would have boomed sooner? Like, do you have thoughts on that?
I think it was probably because cowboy is cool again. Because it's not, I mean, the majority of the people that I shoot videos with, they were cowboys before it was cool. They will be cowboys after it's cool.
Right.
This is not, it's not a phase, mom. It's something
No,
that
I
they
know.
have done forever.
Yeah. I guess I was saying like, do you think if people had heard their music earlier, like before like this year, last year when it was getting very popular, you feel like people would have genuinely enjoyed it, or you just think the timing wasn't right? Like, I don't know, it takes people time to like open up to it. I always wonder about that. Kind of.
I do think people would have enjoyed it for sure because another thing with a lot of the artists that I shoot videos with is there's not that many of them are singing songs about cowboys necessarily. They're
Yeah.
singing songs about the lives that they live, which just so happens to be usually ranching. But I think that's what makes them great songwriters is they're just singing about life problems or regular things that people run into every day. Their spin on it is it's happening to them on a ranch, so it just so happens to be Western. So I think the people that lean heavily into like the cowboy image, maybe that's become more popular recently, but most of the artists that I work with, they sing songs that are applicable to anybody from any walk of life.
Mm. Sure. Super cool. Um, so did you have like you really obviously didn't have much expectations for the page except for it getting these people as much exposure as potentially they could get, right?
Yeah, I still to this day tell artists the same thing that I told them day one. I just want to make my friends famous. That's all I'm trying to do. It doesn't really matter to me. I don't have any desire to, but these are people that I feel like are worth listening to. And even if my page is not the biggest page in the world and my YouTube page or Instagram, I mean it's still kind of a small niche market, but um the aim has always been to, even if it's a little tiny boost, if I can just boost these artists and help them in any way that I can. And there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff too, maybe more recently, because since I've been around this for a couple years now, I've met a lot of people in the industry. I've learned a lot more about how the industry works. So I'm always tickled when I get phone calls from artists that I work with who are folks that maybe have never played a show, or they've played very few. They don't know much about it. And I always love getting those phone calls where people are like, okay, what do you think I should be doing here? Like for example, one artist that I worked with who is largely unknown to anybody other than people that watch my channel, just got called by the production company that buys all the music for Yellowstone. And so from that, they called me and they're like, what do you think? I don't know what to do. Like this is a big deal, but I don't want to screw it up. And so I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I can say, okay, well, let me connect you to this person and this person and this person. And I don't know the answers to it, but these people
Right.
do. And so I've been able to kind of be the in between to connect to these people that are outside of the music industry to people in the industry. And I've also been able to kind of vet those people because there's a lot of people that are not that great in the music industry. So I can, kind of feel them out myself and then kind of, I don't know, put a stamp of approval on them, I guess, for
Yeah, for
being
sure.
good people to work with.
Yeah, I mean, um I think your authenticity and like your humbleness shows through everything that you do. So I think you've done a very good job at that. And I think that it shows that you love who you work with. And that's kind of prominent in what you just said, because they come back and like you're obviously friends with them. So that's really cool. But
Hmm.
I mean, that's like this. Like I didn't start country credits at all for me or to even make it big. Like I just wanted to kind of spotlight friends that were writers or producers or like bandmates that like didn't get exposure. So I get it. That's super cool. Do you feel like there's like what do you think is like the biggest misconception, I guess, of like cowboys and your whole culture out there out west?
Um, I think maybe there's a couple, but I think a lot of times people, cowboys are seen as these kind of like rough, tough dudes, which a lot of times they are, but I think a lot the stereotype that goes with that is they're not terribly intelligent people. And I think that is something that um that's something I try and show in these videos with just the songwriting and stuff that people, the thought, the deep thought that they put into the songs that they put out there.
I mean,
These
I
are
would
not,
almost say it's more thoughtful than most artists.
yeah, and I mean, you think about what these guys do for guys and girls do for a living. They're a lot of times they're alone, whether they're fixing a fence or out on a horse moving cows around. They're spending days on end sometimes without seeing another person.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of time to have some some pretty deep thoughts and write songs and write poems and all this stuff, like it's and I think that gets missed a lot by people that they only see one side of what cowboys are and they forget like how artistic and intelligent a lot of people are.
Yeah, you've definitely showed that. Like I would never think that they're not intelligent. I mean, that's never crossed my mind, but I didn't necessarily put like art and cowboy, like the cowboy lifestyle, like hand in hand until I found your page. So I love that you did that. I didn't realize like how many I mean, I knew that there was a lot of like Western artists that were great, but there's so many that aren't even known
Yeah,
well.
there
Spotlighting
an,
it. It's good.
I mean another example of that is um it seems to me that like poetry in general, society views that as a pretty, lots of people like poetry, but as far as people that uh, go to shows to listen to poetry and things like that, that's a pretty like artsy, finger snapping kind of thing that generally, is kind of reserved for, a certain niche of people. Other than that, cowboys are probably the only ones that regularly recite poetry, and it's very well attended and very well accepted. And I
Hmm.
think that's always something that is, if you're in or close to the cowboy world, you get that. But people that don't at all. Like they would never think of these like gruff, rough, tough cowboys going into town to listen to poetry. So it's that along with songwriting, it's the same thing.
So can we talk about your poetry? Like, so you've been writing poems. I mean, they're so good. Like, you got to do more. You got to post more. You probably have like 1,000 poems, but you got to post them.
Yeah, I've got a lot of them. There's a really great book. It's called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and I've probably read it like 6 times at this point. It's a short book, but it kind of talks, and anybody that like listens to this that is an artist in any way, that book is really helpful, I think. But there's one part in there where he talks about your muse visiting you. And so essentially what he's talking about is, your muse is creativity, and whether you're a writer or a poet or a songwriter, whatever it may be, if you're not if you're not there and ready when your muse shows up, and then you're willing to, accept that kind of creative idea, it will just go away and be gone forever. That particular idea. And if you just over time don't open your mind to it at any point, it probably will go away. It's like a muscle.
Hmm.
And so I think with my poetry, um, the until recently, it was something that I would have like an idea come in my head, but I never figured it was worth writing down or, giving much time to, and I would just let it kind of flutter away and I would never think of it again. And recently I've been writing more of that stuff down.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I mean, I think you're very talented, so, and I think a lot of people like, I guess that's the positive of social media is like having, if you post it and people share it and find out about it, like, I know social media is annoying in a lot of ways, but I feel like you're doing a good job at like spreading a lot of awareness about all the things that you just spoke about with the rough side of cowboys versus like that artistic side
Hmm.
that they have. So I think that a plus side of social media and like your page, um, is just getting it out to so many people. So
Yeah. Yeah, that I did the first poem I ever posted where anybody could see it was a poem I wrote when I was with Coulter Wall up in Saskatchewan. And the poem is about we went on a great big like 3-day long ride gathering. I mean, that was as close to what you see in cowboy movies as you will find nowadays. I mean,
that's what
just
you told
days.
me about, right? That whole long thing.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience. And so me and Coulter and his family and friends and stuff went out and did this great big deal. And when we got back the last day, I sat down. I actually wrote like half that poem in the shower, and then I got
No
out of the
way.
shower and I wrote down the rest of it. Um, but people seemed to really, like that, and it did way better than I ever thought. And obviously, part of it is because Coulter was involved in it. Everybody loves everything Coulter does, but part of it was also that I think people
I think
didn't
so,
even know
but
that
I
I
think
wrote
it's so.
poetry.
I remember when you read that to me before you posted it, and I was like, oh, read it again. It was so, it was so good. No, I think I feel like it's just gonna be part of your journey. Like you didn't think you'd write a book. Like I feel like you're just gonna get really into poetry a little bit more. At least into sharing it. And then like a year from now you'll be like, oh yeah, remember when I didn't really share my poetry that much? But maybe not. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I
Probably.
might put out a I might put out a poetry book if I get enough poems put together
Yeah,
to
you have
to
to.
do
Like
that.
I said, remember, like you should do like photography and then poem, like flip book. I would buy it.
Yeah, I could certainly do that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Um, all right, so let's talk about your festival and like,
Hmm.
so was that like your idea? Was that the guy who you were like running it with? Like, who's that? Like, how did that come to be?
It was kind of a pipe dream of mine. Once I started working with all these artists, I would always kind of make a joke to people and be like, "Man, could you imagine if we just got all the art?" Because for the most part, when I go out and shoot these videos with Dusty Vaquero or for Dusty Vaquero, I go out to these people's ranches
All
and
right.
shoot them out there. And I've put 75,000 miles on my van just in the past year, traveling all over the West, meeting up with these people, but rarely are they or never are they in the same place. And so I would always make this joke, how cool would that be if I just got everybody together that's been on the channel
Mhm.
and put together a music festival. But it was certainly just like a pipe dream. I didn't think that that was possible.
Yeah.
And my manager, Ryan at Gold Town Music, I mentioned that to him one day, and he was like, "Well, why don't you do it?" And I said, "I don't know how to handle the ticketing and sponsors, and there's so much stuff behind the scenes that go into creating a music festival." I
Yes.
was like, "Man, I got the connections. I know the people. I could get them together. I could make a really cool lineup,
Mhm.
but I don't know how to run the rest of that." And he said, "Well, you're in luck because I have run several music festivals, so I do know how to do that. If you want to team up on this, let's do it." And so then we just like kind of slowly, the whole time I was kind of thinking, are we really doing this? And then as it built up into more, I was like, okay, I guess we are doing this for real. And so, yeah, the tickets have been on sale for, oh, I don't know. They towards the end of November, I think they went on sale, but the festival's not till May, so we're working on a lot of, um, still got a lot of things being pieced together, but the lineup is put together already.
So, okay, yeah, I mean, there's been like, what would you say, like half the lineups announced, or like you don't want to
I
say?
think I think half the lineup is publicly announced today as of today. This coming Friday, which would be the 20th, another quarter of the lineup will be announced. So three quarters by the 20th. And so we still have a couple things we're ironing out with a couple of the musicians that are going to be part of it, but by hopefully right around the new year, the entire full lineup will be announced, and I mean, it's everything from, nationally touring bands clear down to people that have hardly ever played a show in front of people. It's
That's the
a
coolest part.
mix.
I think that's the coolest part. Like
Yeah,
it,
and it's that was the idea behind Dusty Vaquero as a YouTube page as well, is really what I enjoy finding is these people that have very little to no experience in the music industry, and then I shoot videos with them. But then I've also done videos with like Coulter Wall, or I just recently did one with Corb Lund or Josh Malloy, these people that have great big followings.
yeah,
And really, those people don't need my help promoting their music in any way. And them participating in it is essentially their nod to,
helping the
you
others.
know, the people that aren't there yet, or the people that may not get a chance. And so when I do a video with Coulter and all these people find my page because Coulter did a video with me, that all spills over to these other artists that are lesser known.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I think it's great that they participate like that. But I think it's even cooler, more cool that, like you said, like everyone taking the stage has a tie to the cowboy lifestyle. So it's definitely the real thing. I mean, I know there's like a lot of festivals out that way now, and I'm not saying anything about them, but I'm really excited for yours because it's very authentic and it's very like true to the culture out there, and I think it's great. Really excited.
Ye- Yeah, I think it's very grassroots. Like um every yeah, like you said, every person either is currently a rancher or was at one time, or their dad was, or something like that. They have a very strong connection to it. And also every artist that's on the festival is somebody that's been on the YouTube channel. So they're all friends of mine, people I know, people I really enjoy. So it's, if nothing else, just gonna be a dang good time to hang out with all my friends in the same spot.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, if nothing else, it's a party, so that's good. It's a good start.
That's right.
So, okay, so it's 2 days, and is there like other, like there's different happenings like, there's like camping, like you can camp there, right? Like, so
Yeah, we
let's zoom out. Like, so it's in, can you maybe tell us about like the town and like, is there, if someone wants to fly in for this event, like where's the closest airport? And like, I guess could you kind of paint more of a picture of what it's like for people that aren't super familiar with Wyoming?
Yeah, so the festival is in Gillette, Wyoming, and Gillette is kind of up in the corner of up by South Dakota and Montana. It's right up there. It's very close to Mount Rushmore and the Black Hills and Deadwood and all those places. They're all within like a couple hours of there. So it's a very pretty part of the country. There's an airport in Gillette that you could fly into. It's a small airport though, but there's bigger airports in like Billings or Rapid City, South Dakota, which are all a few hours away. Casper, Wyoming also has one. So Gillette's a small airport. I think there's only two flights a day in and out of there. So, but you could certainly fly there. Um, and we rented out a whole RV park essentially. I mean, it's 100 feet from the front doors of the venue, so you don't need to go anywhere or anything after the show. And you can tent camp out there. You can bring your RV. You can bring a bunch of my friends are bringing out west here teepees and wall tents are pretty common, which are like big canvas tents. And so a lot of my friends are that's what people use when they hunt in the mountains around here or go out, on the wagon to work brand calves and stuff. So that you can camp wherever you want and you can buy those campsites through the website. If your tent, we've been telling people if you're going to tent camp, it would be ideally you'd get a couple people in one spot because they're great big, like an RV spot. So you got tons of room to camp there.
That's so cool. So is there anything else like as far as like will there be food and stuff like that or
Yeah, there'll be a great big beer garden, and we're gonna have the main stage where most of the music is happening, and then we'll also have music out there in the beer garden. So it'll be probably a little bit more of an intimate setting out there on a smaller stage. Where there'll be a bunch of food trucks there and stuff. There'll be tons of food available. We're also doing a goat roping, which
wow,
if I guess if you're from around here, maybe you've seen one, but people that are not from
I
out here,
haven't seen one.
a goat rope, it's just kind of for fun. Like if you've ever watched team roping or something on TV for rodeo, it's essentially the same thing, just much smaller. So no horses involved or anything. It's just kind of
Okay.
fun. It's like a little practice thing where you can rope some goats instead of roping great big steer. So we'll be doing that. I'm sure there's going to be lots of dancing and stuff happening during this deal. We've got a great big kind of dance floor section opened up for people to do all kinds of swing dancing if they'd like.
Wow. That's so cool. Are you like that's a lot to plan. That's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts and stuff, and it's more or less consumed my life for the past couple of months. It's been I mean, I still put out weekly YouTube videos with different artists.
Yeah.
And I still go to a lot of events. Like I was saying, I was just out at the National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas. I was out there for 9 days, shooting videos and just talking to people about the festival, meeting sponsors, stuff like that. So I'm still on the road all the time, living out of my van, shooting videos with people.
Living
Sometimes
the
Yeah, living the dream. I've been before that I was just down in Texas with my friend Brennan and we were out, riding through cows every day and, horseback doing work. So trying to continue living my life as I have been living it while also planning this whole
content
festival.
promoter or like festival planner. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I mean, there's no way that I could do this stuff if it wasn't for Gold Town Music. I mean, they are helping a bunch with all this stuff too, but it's still like I feel like I'm on the phone 6 hours a day now.
That just doesn't seem like you.
Yeah,
But
it's not.
it's to get this done, I guess. I mean, I guess it's worth it.
Yeah, it's not my favorite part of it, but I think once it all kind of comes together and it works, it'll be. And also, this is a first year festival, so we're learning and we're starting from scratch. And, I just keep telling myself it only gets easier from here. We get the first year knocked out, and the second year we'll have a way better idea of what we should and shouldn't do and what we can do better and things like that.
So the plan, yeah, so the plan is to make it like an annual thing,
Oh
obviously.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Very cool. That is so cool. All right, well, so I guess I'll ask like one or two more questions, but I kind of want to ask you like what your like if you had to give one piece of advice to people that are either like a musician trying to get noticed or just someone like just life advice, but I know that I don't know if that's an awkward question for you. So maybe just like what's something that you live by that you could maybe pass along to others or that you like to live.
Um, I guess I'd have, well, I got two different answers for that. As far as musicians like trying to get out there, I really think the best thing that you can do as a musician starting out is to be attending other musicians' shows as much as possible. Like going out to shows, networking, meeting people. Um, there's no way to put a price tag on knowing more people in the industry and learning from people. And generally, I mean, I can't speak for things otherwhere or other places, but out here, musicians are, even if they've never met, they're like immediately like brothers.
Yeah.
And they're very open to helping, or if you've got questions or, oh man, I've got this run up through here and I need to show this date, they might know the exact place where you should be playing in between, things like that. So as far as a musician getting out there, if it's something you want to do for a living or do more of, I think you need, even if you're not playing, you should be at other people's shows, talking to people, getting out there, meeting people. I think that is a seriously underrated thing you can do. And it's more or less free, other than the cost of your fuel to get to the show and back. Um, as far as life advice, though, um, I mean, it's pretty cliche, but I think my life is, it seems to me, is a pretty good representation of if you just pursue and do what you love, it seems to me that things just fall into place if you really find out what you love doing and you're passionate about, and then you pursue that. It's because there's that saying that like you do what you love and you never work a day in your life. I don't know if that's true. I've worked a lot of days, but I still really like what I'm doing, and I think at the end of the day, it's worth it. And so I think, if possible, that's a little harder to answer or to say that to somebody that's got like a wife and kids, and you know
Yeah.
they need to be putting food on the table and stuff. Because I live out of a van and I just go where the wind blows me. So
That's the coolest part.
take that with a grain of salt. But I really do think that pursuing what you really love doing is very important.
Yeah, I agree. Um, Okay, and then the last thing is, so if someone wants to like support you and these artists, but they're not going to be able to make it out there for the festival, what do you like? Do you suggest? How do you suggest that they show their support? Like buying like merch, or is there other ways that you feel like they can like support the whole festival as a whole to like hopefully trickle down and support the artists? Like, is there like festival merch, or is it just the Dusty Vaquero merch, or how's
Yeah,
that
we're we're working on festival merch right now. It's not out there, but we will have festival specific.
merch?
We're also working on we're working on a sponsor level pack kind of thing where, for that exact reason, if there was a business or a ranch or a farm or something like that that, like you say, can't make it in person but would still like to support, we'll get it out to the public pretty soon, where it'll be like they could buy a spot on a banner or something like that, and then we'll hang it up, and they, could just
Sponsorship?
buy a spot and support that way. And then another way that people can support, I haven't really pushed this very much, but YouTube offers subscriptions now. And so I just started doing that not too long ago, but there's a bunch of videos on my YouTube channel that are videos that the general public cannot see, but if you subscribe, you can see them. And it's $10 a month. So if you just want to support in general, that goes a long ways. Like just putting fuel in my van to keep driving around finding these artists and stuff. So that would be a good way also.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's a great way. $10 a month isn't bad. I don't think.
No, if you wanna see cowboy music thrive, it would help an awful lot. And also I don't have a website or a store online, but if people were interested, I've got Lost Cowboy merch, I've got Dusty Vaquero merch. Just shoot me a message on Instagram and I send like it seems like almost every day I'm going to the post office to send off merch. So um I'm generally pretty quick to send that stuff out to people. So you can hit me
Awesome.
up on there.
Super cool. All right, cool. I mean, I feel like that's pretty much it. So thank you so much for jumping on and good luck with the festival. I'm sure we'll be talking.
Yeah, thanks for interviewing me.